Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Lavina Iyer. I'm the Global Tech and Telecoms Analyst at Economist Intelligence Unit. This is the sister concern to the newspaper on Economist Impact, which is programming today's event. So I have with me a diverse set of panel, without going into very specific introductions, but very quickly, so that you have a sense of their roles and some of the experience. Peter Jackson, right to my left, Global Head of Data Office, Schroders. We have Bilal Gokpinar, Professor of Operations, Tech, Innovation, and Head Marketing and Analytics at UCL School of Management. And we have Ahmed Khader, I hope I got that right, Ahmed? Yes, right. Okay. Vice President, Retail Digital Transformation at E&. And we have Martin Thel, Partner Implement Economics. And we have Daniel Delima, Vice President, Operations, Depop. Okay, perfect. So today's topic is, well, the way we've programmed it is the augmented workforce, getting the balance right in automation. This is supported by Google today. What do we mean by that? A lot of the AI workflows and integration that have taken place are around automating processes. But companies are trying to find the balance on how do you leverage some of the human expertise and how do you ensure there is significant human oversight on these processes as these machines automate some of these routine tasks. So just to set the stage, we'll possibly start off with understanding ways in which you all have tried to champion this at your organization. So I'm trying to understand, could you give us some examples where you've used not just Gen AI, but artificial intelligence and its other capabilities to enhance human productivity at work? Not replace, but just enhance. Could we have examples properly? Peter, let's begin with you.
I can give you an example from Schroders. In preparing sort of background research for account directors and investment directors to interact with clients, we're using AI to extract all sorts of unstructured data from company reports, from news feeds, from their own portfolios and holdings to put together a package which enables the investment director or the client director to have a meaningful conversation with their client. It, of course, doesn't replace the analyst, doesn't replace the client director, and they will have the last set of eyeballs on it, and we're not running money from it. It's to enable a meeting. But it allows them, say, rather than reviewing 5 or 6 documents before a meeting, it allows them to review in total many, many more than that to create the content. Prior to that, my last role as Chief Technology and Data Scientist at Outra, we were using AI to actually write code for us. We were using ChatGPT to take unstructured data and put it into a very structured format for us. So both augmenting human activity.
Perfect. There's a more real-life example in telecoms, Emma, that we discussed earlier, and I think it'd be really fascinating to talk about what you've managed to achieve at the retail store level.
Yes, so I've been talking during the day about the AI and the application of it, but I will try to let you know what is happening from a customer-facing point of view, so how customers are perceiving it. But let me give you a bit of a background. So I work in UAE. I'm not sure if you are aware or not, but UAE has more than 200 different nationalities living and working there. They have the fastest 5G on the earth and the fastest fiber to home, and the generation mix is evolving. So the generation Z and generation Alpha now, the biggest cohort representing across the population of UAE. All of this puts us big responsibility to revolutionizing our retail stores. I work in a brick and mortar stores, so we have to give good reason for our customers to visit the store. I will be sharing actual use cases. I will not talk about what should be done. So in our stores, we have introduced a state-of-the-art digital touch screens and the MBA, Next Best Action, that is fully powered by AI. So instead of the agent or the sales or the manpower spending lots of time searching manually about the customer history, the AI-powered applications already give personalized recommendations to our customer based on their history, their tenure, their segmentation. And we are freeing up our team's time to focus on what really matters. So they are focusing on the complex problem resolutions, on the high-value interactions. We also created something called the hybrid customer journey, where AI taking care of routine tasks, while our team is focusing on building relationship and loyalty to our customers. One of the newest things that we have just introduced in Dubai is the facial recognition. So imagine entering a physical store And instead of being verified and having this identity verification, once you enter the store, the system recognizes that you are Ahmed. Not only this, it greets you by your name. So you are not number anymore. Customer are no longer number. I'm Ahmed. And the system offers personalized recommendation based on my patterns and my history and my tenure in the company. These two examples we have implemented, and I think they ensure the harnessing between the strengths of the machine and the human.
I like the bit where you mentioned that you're allowing your employees to leverage AI so that they can focus on more high-value tasks. Yes. And it is this value, this productivity question that always comes up.
Yes, and as long as we are talking about ROI, so we have actual solid ROI. So productivity increased by 18%, conversion rate increased by 32%, and the customer experience NPS, we have hit a record that have never seen before, which is above 90. Because customers now, especially Generation Z and Generation Alpha, are not used to go for the traditional store. And if anyone recently visited a telecom store, I think you will notice the misalignment between the brand app and the store. I think it's very clear. So if the retailers are not taking serious actions to convert their stores, I think at a certain point of time they will be in a high risk to obsolete.
True, very true. I want to stay on this productivity bit for a lot, because I know different organizations, as they adopt artificial intelligence, are constantly thinking about how do we convince our stakeholders that this is indeed contributing to cost benefits, or is it contributing to productivity? So I'm curious to know, what are some of the metrics that you look at as you're looking at adoption? Daniel, I'm looking at you, and Martin, I'll come to you next and a bit more. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, for those of you who haven't heard of Depop, we are a digital peer-to-peer fashion resale marketplace. Of course, James Waters is a hard act to follow because they are the gurus of, digital first. But when it comes to business cases, and this is you have these conversations with traditional companies that are not digital first. And it seems to be really straightforward when you try to make a cost-based business case, right? So you reduced X amount of time in your workforce, that results in headcount reduction, and therefore, the numbers add up. I think what's more valuable is when you switch mindset to a value-based business case. That's, of course, harder to measure, especially when you look at it in terms of output versus outcomes. And, Marty Kagan from the Silicon Valley Product Group says it really nicely. Prioritize your outcomes over your output. Empower your teams to be able to reach these outcomes, and then you will see the productivity gains. And that's at the business level. But if you try to measure every single piece of productivity gain, that's of course, a lot harder to be able to tie that down to your bottom line.
I agree. The outcome versus output is probably a good approach. It came up earlier when we had a panel with Deloitte as well that said you need to have some idea of what is the ultimate goal that you're trying to get to, and then collaborate all these efforts. Martin, I know you authored the AI Economic Opportunity Report, and you had some interesting stats in there. Perhaps you could share some of that for the audience.
Yeah, so that's more when you aggregate the potential up and look 10 years out. Most economists come to the conclusion that generative AI alone is potentially so powerful that it can boost productivity growth over the next decade beyond what we have seen in the past. At a European scale and across all businesses and for the economy broadly, we are talking about an 8% uplift. Mm-hmm. So that is quite a lot. Mm-hmm. And that is fully consistent with what you would see at a business that is fully adopting it. And we at Implement Consulting Group, when we discuss with clients and boards, we would typically say that you should be looking at a 10 to 15% improvement of your bottom line mm-hmm. Over a 5 to 8 year horizon, if you are sort of at the forefront. On average, that's the scale of the opportunity. And then when you break it down into a specific process within a company, then of course the improvements can be much bigger. 20, 30% isn't unusual. And I tend to agree it is usually measured in time saved or headcount. And I think that is way too narrow. Yeah. I fully agree with that, because there's so much in terms of getting higher quality within less time, yeah. and being able to deliver solutions that you couldn't deliver before. So 24/7 high quality customer service. What is the value of that? You couldn't do that with your normal staffing. So I think you are absolutely right that the sheer measurements are a clear underestimate of the potential.
Sure. Okay, now we've established the examples, we've tried to understand and make a very strong argument for how to think about the value bit. How do you actually go about with it, right? Different sectors, very different levels of tech adoption, digital first, some may not be, some are still keeping up with digital transformation investment. So Daniel, share with us some of the learnings that you've had, some of the POCs that probably didn't see the light of day, some of them that did, what worked for it, and how did you use that to influence your approach to encourage more people in your organization? Get comfortable with it. This is not going to replace you, it's going to enhance your workflow.
I think, for us, we lean into AI more to primarily to make the user experience seamless, both on the buyer and the seller side, right? And that is really replacing a human piece of work, because that scale of activity cannot be done by a human anyway, right? But if there are tools that you want humans to do within the company or you people to use, some of the basic barriers to adoption are based on trust or a lack of thereof, right? Mm-hmm. So your models need to be really reliable and credible, and the way to be able to use those is to ensure that you train them on the right data. There's the right supervision around that to make sure that there are no hallucinations, no bias. So the output of the model or the results of the model are trustworthy. And then, of course, I think we have less of this, but I speak to so many larger companies or traditional companies, let me not say larger companies, traditional companies that have this problem, and that is the fear of, what if I put something into ChatGPT and that's going to get me into trouble, And, sure, models or tools like ChatGPT or Claude or whatever you may have, the inputs that you put in there are used to retrain the model. So don't put customer sensitive. One should be careful about putting sensitive PII data into that, or any proprietary information that you might not want to share with anybody outside your company. But there are ways to be able to have enterprise versions of these where you can control what the privacy settings are. You can have contractual agreements with these companies, and then you can empower your teams to be within a certain framework or a certain simple set of rules. You can train them and empower them to innovate and use that to see how far they can go. And that, I think, builds a little bit more trust. When that fear of getting into trouble goes away, when they can trust the models, then you see something really powerful coming out of that, because then they're empowered to be able to use it to do better work.
Of course, everything you said just reminded me of the first AI bootcamp that we had at the Economist Group, where the entire bunch of journalists were a bit skeptical of the outputs that were coming out. But then it took some training from the folks at Microsoft to help us understand how the model thinks and how it's coming up with these outcomes to decide where we want to use some of these workflows. Bilal, building up on that, what are some of the safeguards that companies need to think about when they're putting maybe not just experiments, when they're actually launching AI solutions at scale?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think in terms of the safeguards, there are a couple of perspectives, right? One, from the efficiency perspective, I think kind of really keeping human in the loop, because some of the AI models, you really need human involvement to make it actually more efficient, right? There is the ethics-based perspective where, there is the machine bias, and you really need to make sure you have some human involvement to be able to monitor that, to be able to improve that. But I would say probably one of the really more important points about this is this learning aspect, because one thing is if your AI models, if you automate tasks, and if you are not really learning, if your human beings are if your human workers are not really learning, are not engaged with the technology, then after some point, really, right, you are not going to be able to leverage the entire human capital that you have in your organization. And in fact, some of my research that we looked at automation, not just the AI technology, but automation in general, one fascinating finding we have is actually with automation, there is the risk of reduced innovation by the organization. So these long-term innovation capability may be negatively affected as a result of automation that is happening inside the organization. And there's some fascinating research recently also where people look at this idea of falling asleep on the wheel. Basically, if you rely, the over-reliance on algorithms may really make you make very simple mistakes, and this can then backfire actually quite substantially. So I would say this keeping human in the loop and really having a good rationale and having a good systematic understanding of really how to keep humans and to what extent to automate and make sure humans are not just observers or in this process, but really they're actively engaging, I think is quite important.
I agree. And that ties in nicely with my next question, which is we've read enough alarming headlines about jobs probably being lost or being eliminated. While I don't agree with some of those figures, I think it's going to be more of a case where we're all compelled to. I mean, a couple of years ago, before ChatGPT was launched, none of us really knew. We're all very good communicators, but we didn't really think about prompting. Now we do. It's part of whether you're marketing or you're in finance, you're thinking about how to get the most out of a generative AI tool. So, Bilal, if I could stay with you to understand what would be these, if organizations need to think about this human aspect, this very controversial topic of job losses, and how do we get them to think about job redesign instead of job replacement?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I think, first of all, we should accept there will be some job losses, right? I don't think we can just assume that it will be, things as is. Well, there will be some portion of the jobs, I think they will disappear.
And which categories would these be? The ones where you're saying there will be job losses?
Well, I think in a lot of, for example, let me give you an example, a lot of customer service agents, call centers, right? And there's been some also really interesting research. I would say 60-70% of the calls that they receive, right, that are not really super difficult, that are very typical. For those, you don't necessarily need human agents to address these calls, right? But there are really those rare cases, or the more difficult cases, maybe 30-40%, where you really you cannot rely on these algorithms or AI to be able to address that. So, but then how are you going to make sure that humans, workers that are their jobs are replaced? Because I think that these are broader questions to policymakers, to economists. Okay, what is next for these relatively low-skilled individuals? I think that's one question. But then there are also some interesting findings that we see in research. For example, people who are maybe these customer service agents whose jobs are augmented by these algorithms, we see not only higher productivity, but also we see higher happiness. They report actually greater job satisfaction by being able to use some of these AI technologies as augmenting their capabilities, not just. So I think in general, replacement, it is real. There will be some replacement, but I think in terms of augmenting the work, there is a lot more we need to do to be able to understand, have a very detailed task perspective on what tasks may be augmented better and how. And I think there is a lot of work that's needed in that area.
I agree. Martin, anything? Oh, sorry, yes.
I want to comment on this example of customer care because I've been working in customer care for 14 years. What I've noticing is that I think some of you might notice this with the hype of the AI and this competition of CEOs that this company applied AI, have to apply AI without knowing exactly what should be done. So in under this pressure, sometimes with the good intention that we use the technology, we get the technology without exactly knowing what we are going to do with it. So if I will take the customer service, a chat bot or voice bot, in some cases, organizations had to remove this for a specific type of customers because customers are, instead of being promoter, they are not happy with the algorithm, how it works. So we need to be very careful when applying AI, especially when it comes to customer-facing area. This is very important just to highlight.
I agree. Yeah. Sorry, Peter. Yes.
If I may pick up from Bilal, I think that in terms of job losses and certain roles going, I think certainly around operational efficiency, we will see job losses. But I think we've been on that journey already. We've had a whole era of RPA, robotic process automation, and manual processes, people have lost their jobs and been replaced by robotic processes, and agentic AI is going to take that even further. But equally, I think we've seen the changing skills and upskillings of other parts of the department. If we take sort of investment management, asset management, our quants over the last 10 years have learned Python. 10 years ago, they weren't writing Python. They were perhaps writing a bit of SQL or using macros and spreadsheets. But now they're writing Python in Jupyter Notebooks. So their skills have changed. I think that we're going to see more of that, perhaps just a bit accelerated.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yes, Martin.
No, just back to your question. So should we think of it as rather job redesign versus job destruction or job replacements? And we looked into the numbers across Europe, looking across thousands of different occupations and what these people are actually spending their time on at work, and combining that with research showing or estimating which tasks of each of these occupations could potentially, over time, as the technology develops, could be automated or augmented with the help of Gen AI. So if you take the middle of the road assumptions there, and there are wide ranges because the technology is still developing, but if you take middle of the road, the answer to your question is 61%, and 61% being jobs that predominantly would see a redesign, but where the majority of the tasks that they conduct at work are those where Gen AI can work together with the human to drive, I would say as an economist, more productivity, but create more quality, with less time, just produce more value. And then for those jobs, the 61% of jobs, which are, marketing managers or school teachers or architects or economists or consultants, and those are 61% of the jobs that we have in our economy. They would also save a bit of time. And what is special, and I think it's important to acknowledge or realize that generative AI is in many ways upside down to what we have learned from the past about what automation and technology can do, because it addresses entirely different capabilities and different tasks in our work life. So that's I very much agree to the redesign will be the big chunk of it. Then the job losses, if you take that middle of the road estimate, it is only around 7% of the jobs that we have today where Gen AI potentially over a period of 10, 15, 20 years can do more than half the task. And the example that I use is exactly the call center personnel. That would be in that category of, if you look at what they do, then 50% or more of that is potentially automatable by Gen AI. And to me, then that is a job that could, over time, risk being replaced, at least for a good part of those functions. And then last thing, if you look at the proportion of those jobs that are highly exposed, it is actually not at a scale that is dramatically different than what we have seen historically. It is within the churn of jobs that are being created and old ones are disappearing. And it isn't sort of a massive new scale of that. So I think our economies are capable with reskilling and care to cater for those changes.
Absolutely. I completely agree with that last one. I think the messaging on that needs to be more probably made more louder than some of the alarming headlines that we see on losses. But we have a quick question from the audience, and I usually keep these to the end, but this is relevant to what we're discussing. Do you think companies have an ethical responsibility to then upskill, retrain staff with the uptake of agentic AI? Well, the polite answer obviously will be yes, but I want to know how are you doing it at your organization? Daniel, yes.
Yeah, I think it's good business practice to continue to invest in your people, in upskilling them, right? Assuming they have the skill and the will, right? There might be people who do not have the skills inherently to be able to, for you to train them. In which case, you do the harder, more expensive thing of hiring people externally who have the right skill set, right? But if you've got people who are ready, and can be trained, it actually it makes better sense for you to train your own workforce rather than have to go out and acquire people with this upskill. You're not going to be able to do that for 100% of your workforce, right? So the people whose repetitive jobs are going to be, not required anymore, then you need to then think about what else they could do in general. But if you want to augment your workforce with the right skill set, of course, it always makes better sense to try and upskill your own team rather than have to go outside and get somebody external.
I agree.
I like the question, so thank you for whoever asked this question, because I believe in our case at least, we have ethical responsibility to upskill and train our team. So recently we have introduced a training which is mandating for all employees that covers all AI. It's not a technical one, but it comes from the responsibility of the company to train the people. And from my personal experience, there are some people will see it as threat, and some people will see it as opportunity. Okay, this is life. So in all cases, companies should do the effort to train, and I believe some of the people who are seeing still a threat will live by their own chances.
Of course.
At Schroders, we wrap this into a data literacy program, which is wider than just AI, because data is becoming more and more prevalent in people's jobs, and so we need to raise the data literacy appropriately across the organisation. I think there's another answer to that question as well. I think society has an ethical responsibility to upskill and retrain people, from schools right the way through to people seeking new jobs.
That's the one thing I want to get to. Early in the morning, there was a question from the audience, and with training budgets under pressure, given the current macroeconomic scenario, how much of a role do organizations like an ITU or UN bodies play with regard to collaborate with governments? Because this is not just about emerging tech, but it's also making basic digital infrastructure more accessible. We still have vast amounts of emerging markets where under 50% are not connected to an internet connection, mobile or fixed. So Bilal, Martin, I'm curious to hear any thoughts on previous examples of digital infrastructure or data literacy or just tech literacy programs that have run in collaboration with these multilateral organizations and governments, and any success that you can reflect on.
I mean, one thing I can kind of talk a bit about is also related to the earlier question. I think kind of the role organizations, I think companies in general have in upskilling the workforce and trying to come up with ways. And in a way, sometimes what I see is this title, AI to ROI. I see some organizations being very quick to basically get rid of people because, they can say that, this is how much cost saving I am generating, right? But then I think that kind of perspective may be myopic in the sense that, by having these quick improvements or quick scores, you may be losing that potential that your workforce can generate in the long term. And I think that is something that both companies and like institutions like universities like us, we need to pay a lot of attention to. And as a university, some of the things that we are doing in this regard is, one, we are starting some new programs where it is basically merging in a way generating the next generation of people, marketing practitioners. For example, we have a new program, Marketing Science, which is combining data science skills with really marketing science, the marketing practice, marketing intuition. So that is one, I think, generating and having new programs. Another, we are starting some new initiatives where, as a university, there's a lot of cutting edge AI data-driven activities in the school. So we are coming up with some new research centers where the goal is to support small, medium-sized enterprises in developing these much-needed skills, so that can be a win-win situation, basically.
I agree. All right. I will come for concluding remarks to the panel, but just for the audience in the room, if you have any questions, comments, and observations, possibly please keep that on hand. So just to wrap up very quickly, if If we had to leave our members in the audience with a few tips on, say, a playbook that you follow at your organization, how do you balance the automation side of things, but also leverage the human technical expertise that you have? What would that be? Daniel, let's begin with you.
So the first thing I would say is look for places where AI can create value rather than just cost savings, because the gains that you can get in terms of outcomes are significantly higher. So as I said earlier, outcomes over output, right? The second thing is, I think, as far as possible, try and let the machine do the heavy lifting and use your humans for things that only humans can do, like creativity, empathy, things like complex problem solving or critical thinking and analysis. Where you find the boundaries of the machine ending, that's where your human job starts, and focus your humans on those tasks, which again means that that needs to feed into your hiring requirements, or the skill set that you look for building in your workforce. And last but not the least, I'll say a clear governance framework that will allow your teams to innovate with confidence. And that's how you can find the balance between top-down strategy and bottom-up empowerment. And that's where the beauty really comes in, where you see a great workforce being able to be their absolute best, being able to deliver on this broader company strategy and move your company in a certain direction that meets your customer outcomes.
I agree. Some of the best ideas, I think, for our AI bootcamp came when everyone was given an enterprise license for 3 months, and some of the solutions that came up, quite creative. But, so interesting. Martin.
You don't know what you can achieve when you have no constraints.
Yes.
Well, building on that, so if we were to boil it down into 3 things, then from our consultants working with achieving benefits from Gen AI, we would first say, dare to imagine the possible. So really to see if you can, I think it's also aligned with what you are saying, cultivate, where ideas and where you encourage people to envision truly transformative things that you can do together with the tool. Because it is a tool that evolves together with you. If you train it in a certain direction, it becomes better. So we need to open people's brain towards what is actually possible with this. So if you cultivate that line of thinking, is number 1. And then, pretty simple, basic, but anchor this in a relevant customer problem.
Agree?
Make sure there's a customer problem behind whatever you do.
Exactly.
and then I think there's back to skilling and so forth, and you can put it in many different ways. But I think with AI evolving, it can learn. Humans learn as well, and our capabilities evolve, and we would probably be more. Knitted together in evolving together. Yeah. So embracing that people can also evolve as they learn with the technology. And if we look at some of the research, it's actually amazing that if you give an AI tool to a group of graduates and test them without the tool, and then give the same group the same exercise with the tool, the ones that improve, everybody gets better with the tool. Yeah. But the ones that get improved the most are those least well-performing in the first. So it has an equalizing power, and I think if we can unleash that in cultivating that, companies are screaming for skills, and if this can help some of the less skilled get to it at the required level, then that unlocks a skill base to get together with the tool. So those would be the 3 things that I would look for.
Ahmad.
Well, I would definitely start by, you have to start by the end in mind.
Yep.
You have to have big why you are doing this. Not because of the competition of everyone is doing it, as you rightfully said. Are we tackling a specific problem? Do we have an operation efficiency target? So we would start by the why, and then, which is very important based on a previous experience, is that you have to engage and onboard the team, not to inform them. So majority of us as a human being, we are against the changes in it. It makes us not feeling good, okay? So and the AI is very broad. and the application is too many. But for certain type of people, what they can see from AI is a ChatGPT. So when you say in the organization will start the transformation and having AI, you have a decent number of your staff will feel unsecured, okay? They don't know what the impact on them. So instead of just sending an email or that we are going to apply this, engage them, let them know what's in it for them. Let them know that the AI is here to empower and support them, increase the productivity or increase the efficiency. This is very important. Also, you have to have, because AI application is very new, you have to have this ongoing circle of feedback.
Yeah.
Feedback from customers, feedback from the business, feedback from your team. And last thing, if you have to fail, fail fast. Fail fast and try another thing. Yeah.
It's amazing. You're the third person who said that to me. Don't be afraid of failures when you're doing your AI POCs. Very quickly, Bilal, yes.
Mm-hmm. So just very quickly, I think kind of this human aspect and kind of humans can be underrated. I think that is something that I want to highlight, kind of like this frontline innovation. Really, if you want to thrive long term, just these myopic productivity improvements shouldn't be the main decision driver. And actually, just relatedly, a long time ago, I was working with a large auto company where they had this huge productivity kind of drive, and as part of that, they actually laid off like thousands of people, mostly really experienced senior workers because they were expensive. And when they measured immediate productivity, of course, they were much lower in comparison to younger workers. But then a couple of months after they fired these people, they realized kind of, these individuals, their immediate productivity maybe was not very high, but they were playing a crucial role in kind of making sure that different kinds of tacit knowledge inside the company was communicated, was shared. So, they were these hidden kind of basically knowledge brokers in a way in the organization. And when you fire them, then, that can be a really huge mistake for long term. So I would say be cautious in kind of like in this, job replacement aspect. And if you can liberate people from mundane tasks so that they can have time and energy and motivation for higher value-adding tasks, I think that's kind of really much more preferable.
Just don't make any drastic calls the minute you start automating with AI. Great. Yes, Peter.
I'll go with 3 very quick ones. I challenge fail fast. I prefer the phrase succeed quickly. I think the second one, to narrow that feedback loop, I don't believe that AI should sit in an innovation center. I think it should be right next to the business,
yes.
Right on their desk. So the innovation ideas, the business application is flying back and forth really quickly. And thirdly, you would expect this from me, don't underestimate the amount of data management that is needed. Really good data governance, data management, data engineering, because none of this will work without it.
I agree. The value of your data is very key as you're building with AI. Well, those were most of my questions. We do have time for 1 or 2. If there's anyone in the audience who'd like to make an observation or comment. No one's feeling particularly brave? Okay, all right. Well, our panelists are available for networking later, so please do grab them. I encourage you. There are a lot of case studies we've not discussed here, but they're bursting with a lot of ideas, so please find them. Please speak with them later on. Thank you so much for joining me this afternoon, and thank you all for listening in.
Thank you.
Thank you.